We'll probably have a couple of minutes of people joining and things, but we'll start with some intros. Thanks for coming and thanks for watching. My name is Nicola Telford. I've got a horrible cold and I am the founder of ViewsForChange and the Impact Marketing Club. And I'm really happy to be here with Dan Meade today. We're going to be talking a lot about founder mental health, how to build an impact startup, and how to the extra challenges that impact founders face, and probably loads of other stuff as well in there. I mean, Dan and I had a conversation before this that we probably should have recorded because it had some good content, but there's going to be lots to talk about. So Dan, would you like to do a bit of an intro, tell us about Cauuuse, and then we can get into it?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for having me on. So I'm Dan, doing an impact brand called Cauuuse, which I keep describing as Moonpig, but for charity. But I also keep being told off for describing it that way because it's not very inspiring or anything like that. So the official sort of elevator pitch is Cauuuse is the platform that you get to gift with intention, ditching tat, and give lasting change to the world's most pressing causes. And that starts with a greetings card. So essentially what we're doing is we're providing greetings cards, but actually these greetings cards they're just the sort of byproduct. They're the facilitator for what we're really doing, which is raising funds for really pressing causes and doing it in a real transparent way, so that when you gift when you give it to somebody, what we do is we then tell them exactly how that money is going to be spent, and then sort of 6-12 months down the line, we use media teams and things like that to then get back to you and say, look, this is exactly how your money was spent and what impact it's had.
Amazing. And where are you at in the journey at the moment?
Really early stage. So I'm building an MVP right now. I had hoped to get an MVP out to a private group of testers in time for Christmas, but the reality of that is it's just not going to happen, unfortunately. There's just too many moving parts, and I've got other partners involved now, and so that's just too quick a time frame. So we're now looking to launch in the new year, which is a shame that we're going to miss out this Christmas, but it's good things take time, right?
Exactly, they do. And in the meantime, you're starting a podcast, so I assume that's in the meantime. Tell us a bit about that.
It is, yeah. So this is sort of in a way, it's a marketing angle to help build up my audience for this business, but also it's kind of therapy for me, So I'm launching a podcast called Building a Purpose Brand. And it's going to follow the journey that I'm going through as a solopreneur, because that's what I am right now, building Cauuuse. But actually a big element of it is going to be around mental health and founder mental health and that kind of stuff, because not too long ago, I started posting on LinkedIn around some of my own experiences with mental health, specifically around building a business and the pressures that we face from hearing other people's successes and things like that in comparison. So I started posting those on LinkedIn, and it received a lot of good feedback. I literally had founders messaging me going, hey, look, thanks so much for saying this. I feel like nobody can say this stuff. So I want to help make that just the norm. And so one of the ways I'm going to be doing that is hopefully through this podcast. And, my intention is not only to just talk about Cauuuse and those kind of things, but actually talk about mental health and hopefully have some guests on too to talk about their journeys.
Well, hopefully we'll talk a bit today as well, quite honestly, about both of our experiences in this space. I'm very happy to share my experience anyway, so we can talk a bit more about that today. So in terms of like where to start with this whole piece, I think both of us are sort of in the impact or purpose space, and I think one of the really interesting challenges that we face is differing definitions of what that looks like to different people. Do you have a a definition for impact or purpose, or whichever, like, insert word here, that you use? And what do you think about the fact that there's lots of different definitions?
Yeah, I think it's really important to first of all recognize that any business that has an intention of doing good in some way, that's a really positive thing. Like we shouldn't be, invalidating that in any way, right? So even if you exist for profit, you exist to build the life that you want for yourself, but at the same time you are a little bit conscious about giving back or on the environment and that kind of stuff. And I think actually that deserves recognition, because that's not everybody. But I think for me, the real definition of an impact business is one where that's the mission, right? So where the impact, where the purpose is put first, and you build a business model around that impact rather than having impact sort of bolted onto your business model. Do you feel the same?
I agree. I think we see a lot of brands now adding impact, which is, like you said, shouldn't be by any means sort of belittled. I think that's the way that we need to make change, is by people integrating positive impact into business models that already exist. But I think in terms of starting a brand or starting a company or starting a business that has impact baked in, like, it is literally the intention of the business to create a positive impact. And I think those sorts of models can be criticized quite heavily, because
For sure.
the classic, well, how can you be a purpose with profit business? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Or lots of people who wouldn't agree with the, like, why aren't you a charity? There's that sort of old hat thinking that's and to be fair, some people should be charities, perhaps, like maybe that model works best for them. But and we talked about this a bit I did a webinar, God, it was ages ago now, with a couple of incredible women, where we talked about how to become an impact brand and talked about what purpose meant to us and what impact meant to us. And the general consensus was around intention, and that piece that your intention is to do good, and it's sort of meaningful in everything that you is part of your decision-making process, rather than it being, oh, well, we do something good over here, but our core business model is to make money for our shareholders, so there's a conflict there, I think, which is hard to manage. But I think it's that the sort of pure impact brands would have it as part of their story.
Yeah, it is. And I think, you touched on one thing where, you can face a lot of criticism or skepticism, shall we say, from some people that are like, why aren't you a charity? And I think a lot of the times it's actually the other way around. So you mentioned maybe some businesses should be a charity. I actually think some charities should be businesses, mostly because by doing a business, you can become self-sustainable, right? So with charities, you're very reliant on donations and things like that. And we know that whilst giving is still fairly consistent throughout things like economic downturns and stuff like that, it is still impacted. Whereas, like, if you're running a business and you're providing a good product or service, you can have some more assurance there that the funds are going to keep coming in. And actually, I just think by running as lean and as agile as a business, I think you can actually be more effective as in the charitable aspect. So I think a lot of charities could actually do or benefit from being a business rather than a charity.
Yeah, I think a lot of them as well are also massively impacted by, what's the flavor of the month in terms of what causes we care about, or what's in the media. Like, over the pandemic, there was a huge shift in where our money went. And obviously, there was very important causes that needed to be supported, but we also found people, funneling money into the NHS that frankly should be probably funded by the government, but we're not going to get too political here today. And yeah, donations as an income stream will often not even be the primary income stream for a lot of charities from individuals. So and they work with businesses to get a lot of their income as well. But no, I think you're right, and I think there's a reframing that needs to happen. And Charlie Farrard, who spoke on this webinar that we had before, talked about reframing profit to prosperity, and instead of, the idea of profit feels a bit sort of dirty, and it's you're making money, and you're spending money to make money, sort of round and round the houses, and that's your primary concern. But if you're looking at prosperity, your whole the mindset shifts to that money being used for good, which I think is a really interesting, just simple linguistic change, allows us to change how we sort of perceive businesses or impact businesses, or anyone in that space.
Yeah, for sure. It is really interesting how just a simple change in language can really help convey what your intention is. Don't get me wrong, like us impact businesses, we do exist to drive a profit. Like we have to, in order to keep surviving, to keep doing. And then actually, like, we are, let's be honest, we are trying to build a certain lifestyle for ourselves too, right? It just so happens that, like, we have a conscious that we want to do good as part of that. So profit isn't the be and end all, but it is something that we still, we're very much aware of, that we need. So I think a language change can be really helpful in that respect, because then you're not conveying that, you're sort of going after, like, the greed angle, for want of a better word.
Yeah. And I think, like, I mean, this could be a segue into another conversation, because I think it's important to note that, like, people driving a business, or driving a or, like, part of a team or managing a business, need to feel supported and feel like they can, survive. And people just, I mean, I've had this a couple of times where people have sort of questioned me on, like, well, you shouldn't be paying yourself, or you shouldn't, you should be blood, sweat and tears to go into this. And obviously, I mean, literally blood, sweat and tears goes into the work that I do. But if I can't financially support myself, then the only thing that's going to happen is I'm going to become resentful of the business that I'm building. And if you're not feeling, supported by the work that you're doing, and you're not getting any feedback that's positive towards yourself, that's an important thing to recognize. And you're not just an entirely selfless person because you're do you know what I mean? It's such a, like, hard one to talk about without sounding like you are just being, you are just running a business to turn a profit. But
no, you've got a really good point. I think, like, we have to, we have to take a salary. We have to make sure that actually we are comfortable in our day-to-day lives, because if we're struggling personally, then we're going to struggle to put our all into the business. And if we struggle to put our all into the business, then it's not going to be anywhere close to as impactful as we want it to be.
Exactly.
Or we need it to be. We exist to actually have a significant impact on the world that we live in. And I don't think we can do that unless our personal conditions are really, like, optimal. Okay, that when you're starting a business, it might take you some time to get to that optimal sort of range, but I don't think anyone should sort of be, put down because they're taking a salary, or, they're living comfortably out of their impact business.
No, I agree, but I think there's still an attitude out there. Well, I mean, this maybe just applies to startup founders in general, especially early stage, pre-seed startup founders. There is a school of thought, and it's very much a privileged school of thought, that you should just live off what you've got while you're starting the business. And, there's the stories of living in cars and, all that sort of glorified nonsense, that if you're raising money, you shouldn't be paying yourself with it, or you should be going everything into everything else. But there's an assumption of privilege that you have, cash to sit on, or you have a house to live in, or you have all those things, and it acts as a barrier to a lot of people who don't have, the ability to just start a business and quit their job and not get any income and all those sorts of things. It's not, which is sort of another angle, which I didn't think we were going to go down today, but of the privilege of being able to start a business and taking that, you know, time to build one.
How did you make the transition from, you know, what you were doing before to starting ViewsForChange? Like, how did you go on?
Yeah, so no, so I'm just thinking, so I started years ago when I was in a marketing role. God, how long, where are we now? 2022. It's probably about 2016, 2015. I started freelancing alongside my job because I was just kind of interested in, you know, different projects and like expanding my skill set. So I started freelancing with a couple of startups and got to the point where I was being paid more for the freelance work outside of the job than I was for my job itself. I wasn't particularly enjoying my job. And there's a whole long story, which like I won't share today, about a very, very toxic workplace as well. And so I got to the point where I could self-sustain from that freelancing work, then built that up to the point where I couldn't even handle the work, brought in a co-founder and we built an agency then. And then we were just, you know, on the agency trail for about 5 or 6 years. Where are we now? No, probably till like 2021, 2020. And we started ViewsForChange while still working on that. So I managed to manage myself out of a lot of the work and still pay myself out of the agency for a period of time. And then now I'm out of the agency entirely and moved into this business. But even now, like the feeling of taking a salary from the business that is still really, you know, young and fledgling, feels, if I have the feeling of like, I shouldn't be taking money from here, this should be put into other things, or I should build a team. And it's a sort of, I mean, there's an imposter element to it as well. There's like what am I useful for? There's all these people that could build a team with that would be specialists or specific people in that space. And I actually do contract work alongside it to make sure that I'm, you know, not feeling like I'm drawing down too much from the company, even though I pay myself pennies anyway. What about you?
So why do you feel like, you know, you know, you mentioned like an imposter element and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like you don't, maybe deserve isn't the right word, but, you know, right now you shouldn't necessarily be taking a salary? Like, is that pressure you're putting on yourself, or?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that also for me right now, I mean, with ViewsForChange and the Impact Marketing Club, we're in a bit of a change phase at the moment. So it means we're not, you know, hard on growth and hard on those things. We're sort of in a taking stock phase, partly because of the cost of living crisis. People's problems have shifted, and we're trying to assess how we can have the most impact with people, like with the sort of change in how people are operating. So it feels like we're not in that sort of like gung-ho growth at all, you know, growth is everything phase, which feels like then I'm like, well, I'm not pushing for the things that I deserve to then be paid for. But actually, I know that that's irrational. You know, I know that that's just for me, it should be, well, this is actually the most important thing that we can do right now, because it will allow us to have the most impact moving forward. But I've not paid myself through that period of time, which is a weird, now I think about it, it's not the healthiest thing to admit to, but yeah, that's where I'm at the moment.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a difficult one. I get it. I mean, for me, I think, you know, I need to have skin in the game. I need to have something, you know, some sort of reward for my efforts, right? And, you know, maybe that some might think that's a selfish viewpoint, but actually I think, you know, if I can turn up every day and work on this and put in all the effort I possibly can, I need something back for that, and that helps to keep me motivated, helps to keep me going. Because if I'm struggling, or at the moment I'm sort of taking the same journey that you did, where I have another business which is an agency, and I split my time between the agency and working on Cauuuse. And right now it's the agency funding my time on Cauuuse. I'm not taking anything from Cauuuse because it's pre-revenue. But without that, I'd really struggle. I'd have to go and get a job, or that kind of stuff, because I just wouldn't have any income coming in. So I think the goal for me is to launch Cauuuse and get it to the point where it's at least sort of bringing in maybe 3/4 of the salary that I'm used to having, so that then actually I'm I know that I can live, I know that my mortgage is paid and all this kind of stuff, and then I can really put my all into the business. And I'm not going to be I'm going to be proud of the fact that actually I've even reached that point, let alone making hundreds of thousands of pounds in revenue every year.
I think and this is, I mean, for me, I think part of this all comes out of the fact that we raised money initially to fund the sort of build of the startup, or build the platform that we now use. And I take probably more than is normal in terms of responsibility and pressure that I feel for investors being involved in the business, and then putting their money into what they believe I can make into something that gets them a return and also creates an impact. So there is a sort of, there's an added pressure, I think, when you have investors. Like, I mean, I completely agree with you. And now the way that we're sort of focusing and recalibrating the business will be on that sort of sustainable growth. Like you're building an agency, you get enough clients, then you bring in the team, and you sort of like, you step up and you step up and you step up. Whereas when you raise money, it's like, oh, well, you've got this cash, like, let's do this. But then because you're doing it from the sort of opposite direction, often your plans aren't going to work out and things have to change and you have to move, but you sort of push really hard into the strategy that you said was going to work because your pride takes over. So and then you have to change things, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to raise any more money because I don't think it's responsible to do that until we know what our next steps are and how we're building, and have sat with what we've learned. And I'm not going to draw down from the business while I need to reserve that cash to potentially move into the next stage, I guess.
So I'm really interested in how raising funds for your impact startup, first of all, affected your sort of your mental state of mind, because in a way it almost goes against what we're trying to do. These investors are coming in and they want a return, right? And then we don't really want to exist just for that. So there's a challenge sort of there in just that entire thought process. But also I'm really interested to hear how you found speaking with investors, saying, hey, look, I've got an impact startup and impact is first, which means you're probably, your return on investment is probably going to take that little bit longer, and things like that. Like, how did that play out?
Oh God, I could talk about this all day. So, and I don't know if I should, but I'm gonna, because I agree. I promised myself I'd be very honest in this conversation. So, a mix, really. So, some of our investors are impact investors. They care about their money having not only a return for them, but a return that sort of is in lockstep with impact. So by them investing in a business that creates impact, they're having, a return on impact as well, if you like. We do have some investors who are, normal investors, who care about a return on their investment, and that's, the fair enough. And we did have, during the raising process, I mean, I feel like I lost my head quite a lot at different times, but there were frequent sort of flip-flops between, are we impact with marketing? Like, I was like, this is our case, but are we impact with marketing, or are we marketing with impact? And it became this sort of like really, really hard question to keep grappling with. And we were always, you know, steadfast in that we're impact with marketing, but it's very easy for someone to sort of turn the narrative back on you and then tell you you're marketing with impact, or, you know, you start to believe that. And it became a real sort of spiral actually at certain times. And to be honest, right now we probably have maybe a couple of investors that aren't, you know, the best fit for what we actually really want to achieve. But the idea for us, or how we mitigate that, is that we believe that we can create a return on investment and a return on the impact. You know, the return on the investment includes impact and financial gains. And it's worth mentioning that when you're raising pre-seed, we raised a lot with SEIS and EIS. So there's a lot of mitigating sort of solutions there for investors that can, you know, get those tax rebates and things like that. So it mitigates some of that bigger questioning around what the strategy of the business is or where they're actually trying to go. But for me, it was a real challenge actually, and it now is actually probably now is when it's biting me, because now we have, you know, a good relationship with most of our investors, and I speak to them a lot, and now we're really asking those questions of like, how can we create an impact? And in some cases that means that we're not making money, which is fine, because you can add value in lots of ways, and lots of businesses don't make money to begin with. But we have really core value pieces that we're doing that aren't the ones that are going to return financial impact. I'm using the word impact interchangeably here, but yeah, to be honest, it's a bit of a, I was going to say, I can't swear. Can I swear? It's a bit of a head fuck, to be honest. So yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense. Did that make any sense?
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's a big challenge, isn't it? I mean, raising funds for any startup, I think, is a real challenge. And you know, I've spoken with a lot of startup founders that aren't in the impact space, and they said that just raising is a grueling process. Like it just is, and it takes its toll on their mental health, and they have to be extremely resilient and like learn to not be negged out by the no's and all that kind of stuff. And so I think, you know, when you've got the extra sort of challenge of trying to raise funds for an impact business where, let's face it, whilst there are investors that want to invest in this space, they're sort of few and far between. They're not your normal investor. And so, you know, in fact, I follow a few investors on LinkedIn who are very much against this space, because they feel they're just not going to get the return they want as quickly as they want it. So I think that can, you know, that is one of the areas where we as impact founders have a real like extra challenge. Yeah,
I mean, amongst like all the other challenges that I think we face, which I think we need to talk about. But yeah, I mean, raising funds is near on impossible, especially at the moment. Like investment is down across the board, no matter what people say. That's what I'm hearing from different people that I know that are trying to raise investment, and the stats back that up, especially in like VC spaces. You know, Series A is apparently getting absolutely battered at the moment, and yeah, it is an extra challenge when you're saying, well, part of your return is going to be that you have a positive impact in society. They're like, well, that's not my job. My job is to make money. And unless they're like an impact focused fund or investor, it is really hard to get that across. And I think this is probably where the conflict that I had really like came to be, is that you end up changing your narrative for the types of investors that you're speaking to. And if you speak to too many in 1 week that are you know, returns led, which I feel like sounds ridiculous, because of course they're all returns led, but like financially returns completely led, you end up shifting your narrative away, like slowly towards what they want, because you want to avoid the no's, you want to get the investment, you want to get the money so you can create the impact and create this return for them. And I mean, and you know, a lot of investment raising, from what I see from other people and myself, was a lot of it's telling a good story, and if you need to tell the story that they want to hear, and you end up losing yourself a little bit in that process, because become malleable to what they want to hear, so that you get the yes, so that you can crack on and get on with the work that you want to do, because it just takes everything to raise the money. And now looking back, I wish I actually, like, I love, like, a lot of our investors, and I think I'm so glad I met them, and the process allowed me to meet so many amazing people. But like, if I did it again, I wouldn't raise money.
That's
I would go and
interesting.
get
That's
some,
really
I'd go and
interesting.
pay myself some work, I'd pay myself some other way, and I would build differently, and I would not raise money, because like the stress of it is just too much afterwards as
Wow,
well.
okay. That's really interesting, because I'm at the point where I feel like I could continue down the sort of solopreneur route and bootstrap. There is definitely room for that to happen, and that was my original plan. But now I'm at a point where actually I feel like I want to put my all into this. I want this to be my sole focus. And so in order to do that, I need to bring on a co-founder. I need to bring on a few other people with very specific roles. And in order to do that, I need funds. So now I'm like, okay, well, I need to go and seek investment. So it's really interesting to hear that you would, perhaps do it the other way.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to like what, sorry, I think my connection's a bit bad. What you want to build. Like, if you want to build a lifestyle business, like run it like a solid business that makes money over time, and it's sustainable, and it sustains itself, and it creates an impact. Raising, especially like institutional capital, is probably not the right route. That would be my like feeling, because they want hockey stick growth, and they want to see financials that are just going, they want the next unicorn, and lots of people don't actually really want to build a unicorn, and I'm not sure I want to build a unicorn. I want to build a good business that makes money and makes an impact and supports my team and, does good things in the world and makes me feel good that I've had an impact in the world. But I don't know if building a unicorn is the way to do that, and it's so easy to lose your
isn't.
mission. No, I actually think it probably isn't.
Yeah. You touched on a really good point there as well.
Yeah, go
on. Well, just that actually, like, a big part of it for you is the sort of gratification that you get from building a business that does well.
Yeah.
Does good in the world. I think that's a big part of it for me. Like, my sort of journey in the impact space started maybe in 2011, 2012, I think, where I went on holiday and I saw these people wearing these like weird shoes, like these espadrille type shoes. And on the back, it had the Argentina flag and it said Tom's in the middle. And I was like, what the hell is Tom's? And so I sort of looked it up and I realized that I learned about the 1-for-1 model, and I thought, oh, that's actually really cool. Like, you buy a pair of shoes and that gifts a pair of shoes to somebody that, is less fortunate than us and needs them. And I was really inspired by that. And it just so happened that Blake, the founder, he had just released his book. It was called Start Something That Matters. And so I read that and I was so inspired. And ever since then, I've been on this real sort of journey of like, every business idea I ever have just has impact at the core. For some reason, my brain can't figure out another business idea that doesn't have that, and it drives my wife insane. But yeah, it's just, for me, that's probably that's the key driver for me. And when I'm thinking about investment, maybe investors don't necessarily align with that drive.
Yeah. Well, I think it also depends what their backstory is and what they like care about, and also how much they can like their portfolio. What is it they're trying? Like, what are they trying to achieve? I've got some investors who are genuinely trying to support young entrepreneurs or young founders, or even like female founders or underrepresented founders, and that is the core of their investment thesis. It's not about, obviously they want returns from their investments, but for them it's a really positive impact that they can have to invest in female or underrepresented founders that aren't getting the investment from other places, or and I mean, I can't speak for them obviously because I'm not one of them, but like I think I really was quite naive to how much the personal drives these things, rather than like, I thought it was just this, you know, big like machine that we all could just understand from the outside. But I think so much of it's personal, and a lot of us don't even know what it is that's driving us. Like, I mean, for me, yeah, I said all those things and I like stand by them, but like probably deep down, actually, it's probably more a driver to like prove myself. I don't know, probably some Freudian stuff, like I've got to prove myself to my parents and prove that they can be proud of me or something. But like there's a lot of like deep-rooted personal drivers that we don't recognize, that for recognition or for, you know, whatever it is, and one way of doing that is by doing good and leaving a mark that is positive, more positive than it, like, no one's going to remember, like, well, obviously remember some of the big billionaires, but they're not going to be remembered for doing good in the world. They're going to be remembered for making shit tons of money and hoarding it, or giving it back through a foundation, which is, you know, a sort of semi-positive. Well, I don't know, actually. I don't know. Let's not go down that road.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think? What do you think your like actual driver is?
I think for me, I've always had a real calling to building something of my own. I've, you know, ever since I was young, you know, I got in trouble at school, for example. You know, I can't remember how old I was. I think I was like 10. But we had the Pokemon craze, the Pokemon card craze, right?
Yeah.
And I had no interest in this weird thing called Pokemon whatsoever. But what I did have an interest in was making money. And so I realized all my friends were like bringing in these massive wads of cards and then like trading them and stuff like that. And then sometimes like some people were like, you know, giving over their pocket money for them. And I was like, hold on a minute, you know. So I realized I had a newspaper round at the time, and we used to get like little discounts and things. And so I could get Pokemon cards at a slight discount than everyone else. And so I just bought packs of these Pokemon cards and then just traded them for money with my friends.
Yeah.
And like as a 10-year-old, I was like making, you know, not tons of money, obviously, but like, you know, enough money to make me feel a bit on top of the world, you know?
Yeah.
So I've always had this sort of real calling to like build something of my own. And like that can also be to my detriment as well, because sometimes I feel like, oh, I'm not quite where I dreamt I would be. And then that's when it's really easy with things like LinkedIn and stuff to then have that sort of comparison issue where you see other people, maybe they're younger than you, or, you know, maybe they've got like 10 PhDs and all this kind of stuff. You know, you can't help it, but you do compare yourself, right? And so that can really, like, sometimes that really plays havoc on my, you know, my mental health, and I have a bit of a wobble. I'm like, oh, I'm nowhere close to where I want to be and that kind of stuff. But then I just bring it back and sort of realize that, you know, I'm on my own journey, and actually, like, if I had stuck with one thing that wasn't working out, then maybe I would have turned it around and would be in a different position now. But actually, like, I'm where I'm supposed to be now, working on something that I'm truly passionate about. So I'm happy.
Yeah. Let's talk about this LinkedIn thing.
Okay.
I mean, I think this is like, it's common knowledge, right? Everyone knows that everyone's just posting their like highlights reel. They're posting what's important to the like presentation of their personal brand or their business brand, and they're saying everything's great. And to be fair, I'm sure a lot of the time things are great, right? But I know from my own personal experience that I have posted stuff on LinkedIn that suggests everything's great when it's really, really not. And like I'm either literally physically like sobbing the other side of the computer, or I just, you know, I feel heavy and I don't want but I and actually I would probably admit that I sometimes even post something positive when I'm feeling shit, because it makes me feel like oh, well, I'm putting something out into the world that suggests that actually things are fine. So I'm sort of trying to, I don't know, trick myself into thinking that they are. But when you just see that constant stream of people doing well all the time, it's only perpetuating the same problem, right? You're like, for yourself, you're just getting worse and worse, and only like, and this is a symptom across all social media networks. I don't think there's any way around it. And I'm interested to know, like you said, that you've started posting more honestly about like how you're feeling in the founder journey and your mental health. So yeah, talk to me about how that's made you feel, but also the positive reaction that you've seen from other people.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey because it's received a lot of good feedback. It gets people commenting, and you do feel supported. Like, these are strangers at the end of the day. That there might be connections, but most of our connections we've probably not actually met in real life. We just had a few interactions online and that kind of stuff. And so when people are, and it's the same names coming up as well, it does make you feel supported and things like that. And especially when they're thanking you. The thing I've struggled with a little bit is where, I've been quite honest about how I'm feeling in my founder journey and that kind of stuff, and the pressures of everything. And then people sort of respond going, "Oh, you're so brave," or "Oh, I'm really sorry," or something like that. And like, actually, that wasn't what I was looking for. I was sort of, I was trying to say, like, this is my experience and this is what I'm learning from my experience, rather than looking for sympathy or stuff like that. So I sort of struggle when I get those kind of responses. But on the flip side, I feel a weird sense of maybe pride when people send me a DM and say, "Hey, look, thanks so much for doing a post like that. I didn't think we could talk about this stuff." And actually, it's really refreshing to see. And then, like, people actually tell me their journeys. They're still not ready to like put it out on their own post, but they feel like they can open up and talk to me. And actually, I feel like, specifically where I live, there's not too many other founders. There's not too many other people, specifically in the tech space or the impact space, that I can really turn to. And so I want to sort of offer that to people, so they know that if they're going through something, that it's safe to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. Firstly, I think it is really hard to, and I mean, you're exactly right. Like, you get that whole sort of, people put stuff out there and you're like, oh God, that is so brave for them to like say that they've made the like really hard decision to do X, or like even just like accounting for what they're doing as they're going along, and they're saying like, they're building in public and things aren't great. And you do get that initial sort of like, oh God, that's so brave, mainly because a lot of other people aren't brave enough to actually say how they're feeling, I think. But it's a really interesting one, because I think you can get so criticized as well for, or like, okay, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that like my fear of being like, I mean, firstly, completely honest, I'd be like, I mean, LinkedIn doesn't want to hear the shit that like goes through my head every day. And there's like, and my concern is, especially having, raised investment or potentially going to raise more investment, or, whatever, like where you're going, there's a fear that if you admit that things aren't great, then you're presenting, then you're not presenting the sales pitch, the brand, the thing that's like, you're not representing that well enough. If you're saying things aren't good enough, we aren't hitting our metrics, we aren't, I don't know, and I'm doing a live in next week with Daphne Tideman about decoupling your happiness from your growth rates. But like how, admitting that you're like really resentful towards your business this week, or like admitting that like your life is really not all right, and like the business is only making things worse, or admitting those things feels like you're doing a disservice to, you're shooting yourself in the foot with then the growth of the business, And I don't think that's the case, because I think people respond really well to honesty and to like understanding where your thinking has come from and where, like, how you've got to that, like, instead of just announcing you've done this new thing, maybe explaining how you got there and why you've done that is actually really valuable to people, because it's part of the story. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, I think like I don't know, what do you think?
No, I think it is. I think it's really valuable, because we're told, or we know as marketers. So I have a marketing agency that I work on part-time, and I know that marketing is very much your background and what you're doing now. And so we know as marketers that actually companies directly marketing, it just isn't as impactful or isn't as successful as personal brands. That's why personal brands have become such a huge thing recently. Because people respond to people, but people respond less to people that are always like amazing. Everything's always incredible. Well, I'm finding that the posts I see that get the most genuine reactions, get the most support and all this kind of stuff, are the posts that are a little bit like, things aren't great. Things are, this is a challenge for me. And I think that builds up more trust in you, which is ultimately what you need as a founder. You need trust, you need support, you need to build this audience. And if you're building an audience by being truly authentic, I think actually that only goes to your credit. I think there's some argument that, if what you're constantly putting out is the sort of negative side, and there's not too much positive side, then that can sort of backfire, particularly when you want to raise funds. But so I think there needs to be a balance for sure. For me, I'm going through a tricky situation in my sort of home life outside of the business, and it's led to me not posting on LinkedIn very much recently, because I feel like I can't do what you tried to do, where I'm putting out a post to try and present myself like everything's okay, when it just isn't. I can't even motivate myself to do that. So I think there needs to be a balance.
And I think just a wider understanding as well of like, well, not, I was about to say take everything with a pinch of salt in terms of the positive stuff, but I think that's probably not what I mean. I mean, like, just a wider understanding that like there's a human behind like the profile that you're seeing. And like you said, a lot of the people that I'm connected with, or you're connected with on LinkedIn or wherever, you don't know a lot of them. Like, personally, I haven't spoken to them other than maybe like just a couple of interactions, or I'm interested in what their feed is about or whatever, or I can learn from them. But like, just because you're farming out positive content all the time doesn't mean that everything's fine. And encouraging people with like kindness and compassion, that like things, you don't have to pretend like everything's fine all the time. But then you also get like, I mean, for me, and I'm going to try and sort of semi-disguise this story so that it doesn't seem like it's targeted at anyone in particular, but there's I sent out this was in a different format. It wasn't LinkedIn, but I sent out like a proper honesty piece, but it was very much a like setting the scene of like the challenge, like the macro challenges at the moment we're facing, the current situation of the business, how that was making me actually physically sick, and over a period of time, and the stress of that like really impacting my health, and then what steps I was taking to combat those things, and also look after myself so that I could continue on this journey, but in a healthy way. And largely I got a really positive reaction, but I got a couple of the exact reaction that I didn't want to get, which was basically like, this, which was basically, you probably give up now. Like, that's probably what you should do, kind of thing. Which really like is the sort of the voice of my imposter syndrome literally coming to life. And it actually ended up in that case sort of perpetuating the problem more, which is a real shame and kind of annoying, because then you gather evidence to not do these things. but it's
that's what our mind does to us,
yeah,
doesn't it? Like when we're looking to buy products, we look at the reviews, and there'll be
yeah,
99 5-star reviews, and there'll be one star that says the
yeah,
product just wasn't good enough. And that's the thing we fixate on, the
yeah,
one negative thing that really, for some reason, our brain just wants to go, oh, I can't touch this now,
yeah,
and that's sort of what you're doing. Maybe there's a business there. Maybe we need some sort of like pre-screening business where
yeah.
it just like pre-screens all of your comments or your messages to make sure there's no one is gonna make things worse.
Yeah. Or maybe it should be like we should filter. I think we should like have a format of communication that is balanced. And it's like, I mean, it's not maybe like pros and cons, but like whenever you're sort of really excited about something or you're like really positive about something, you always talk about like the context or the other parts of that are that everything isn't just always good, everything isn't like, it's just not possible. And that's the sort of show reel that we're fed every day. And I don't think we don't even realize how much that is getting into our perspective of things, and how much that also we turn on ourselves because we know behind the screen that things aren't always great. And I think like we've said a couple of times, which we haven't really delved into too much, but I think as an impact founder, you have that extra level of critical thinking against you, and your own critical thinking that's like, well, people don't think that what I'm doing is actually having an impact, or I'm not doing it well enough, or like I'm under a microscope because what I'm trying to do is good, and therefore they care more about my ethics. So I've got a higher standard to live up to, and you just put like, I'm sure every founder feels like this, or maybe they don't, unless you're like a sociopath, but like you're just like the intensity of the pressure you put on yourself to do the things that you've said you want to do and actually create that positive impact is immense. And I think it actually drags us down a lot of the time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this call could be 2 hours long, 3 hours long. We could talk for a long time about this. Yeah, you're right. There's a whole, you've got to deal with the pressures of skepticism and all kinds of stuff like that. So that can, like, I know for me, for sure, that has a massive impact on my mental state. I'm wondering if we should look at some of the comments and address those, because I think
do
the
we
ones
have
from
some? I can't
Chrissy
see.
are.
Yeah,
So there's a
I
couple
haven't
from
even
Chrissy.
seen them. Not doing my job very well. Okay, go. Yes.
There's a couple from Chrissy that sort of are talking about what we're talking about right now. So I wondered if we should read those and answer them.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Okay, so we've got Chrissy. I feel like sharing how you really feel on bad days will help others feel less shit when they're also feeling rubbish, almost like you're not alone. If you think others are always doing well, you're like, oh my God, why am I not feeling that? And then you feel more shit. It's a circle of shit. Yes, Chrissy, it is. Sharing how you've overcome the shit days is very helpful, but just posting the shit days might be unuseful without an actionable point. I mean, I agree, but I also feel like there's, and this is just the cynic in me, but I see. Sometimes I feel like there's posts where people are posting the shit stuff to be able to prove that they've overcome it. And like, that's maybe me just being like, I feel like I'm maybe a cynic to a lot of these things, but I sometimes feel like you're just telling me it was shit because you want to tell me that you've overcome it. And what if I feel like I can't overcome the thing that I'm feeling shit about right now, then it actually has the opposite effect. So I don't know. I think if it's authentic and you're saying like, this is what I'm trying to do, or these are the steps I'm taking, but I have this horrible feeling when I see things that are like, things were shit and now they're great, like, do you agree? Do you not agree?
I completely agree. Yeah, I think that authenticity piece is really key, and sometimes you can feel like, or I feel like, is this content for content's sake? Do you know what I mean? Like, could you, are you just doing this to get a reaction, or And I'm sort of, in a way, I'm sort of guilty of it, because I do feel like when I am honest, I do feel like, well, I need to see a lesson in this and I need to present that lesson, and maybe I don't.
Yeah.
You know, maybe
Yeah.
I just need to go, do you know what, this is happening and I haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
I'll come back to you another time, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's sort of like, you know, with that, the whole thing with the crying CEO, right? So that he presented that he had this, like, he had to do this horrible thing, and, you know, and blah blah blah. But, you know, there's a lesson in there and all this kind of stuff, and, like, obviously that got a huge backlash,
Yeah.
because he sort of, you know, he ended up making it about himself in a lot of
Yeah.
people's eyes, rather
Yeah.
than, you know, all the employees and stuff that he had to let go. So I think,
Yeah.
you know, sharing the hard moments and stuff is really important, but I think we have to do it with real, you know, we have to do it for the right reasons. We have to have a lot of authenticity around it, and we have to be really careful about actually, like, by saying what we're saying, how we impacting the people that are reading it, or the impact, or how we impacting the people that it talks about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the crying CEO, actually, like, I mean, my first thought, and I know this is like maybe the wrong thought, but like I looked at his profile and I was like, oh, he does LinkedIn content. That's what his agency does. And I'm like, well, this is just a stunt. And like, and again, maybe cynical of me and unfair. And I'm sure, you know, like, letting people go is a horrible thing to do, and it's not just, you know, it's horrible for everyone involved, but there are also, you know, people losing their jobs, which seems like the priority in that scenario. And I think what happens, and this is my view about pretty much the entire world, the way we live now, is we lose the nuance in everything in the way that we communicate nowadays. Like, everything's short, it's sound bites, it's like what stands out in that post, or like whether it's like the crying piece, and then, like, you know, it's everything's condensed, and it means that you lose all nuance of like all of the factors of everything. And I know that, like, we can't operate in the world how it is now with you know, taking time and consideration for every single thing, because everything's moving fast. But that's the collateral, is that we consume so much, and we don't have time to reflect on every piece of information that is entering our brains, I think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm just looking at Sean's comments. So this is sort of off the mental health topic a little bit, back to what we were first talking about. But one of the questions, he said, what should come first, the business model or the impact? Which I think is a really, actually quite a big question.
It is.
I think it really, yeah. So if I'm answering it, I think it really depends. I think, you know, a good business will extend from solving problems. And so I don't think you can just dream up a problem, because a founder needs to be passionate about the problem they're solving. Because if they're not passionate, if they don't have that real drive, then they're not going to be able to give it their all, and really they're not going to build a big business. Maybe they can build a business that is sustainable just for them, but, you know, if their goal is to build something bigger, I think they'll struggle. So I think you need to sort of see a problem first, and find an audience that you can solve that problem for, and then go, okay, well, you know, I'm really passionate about making an impact in this specific way. How can I combine solving this problem with that, and then build your business model around the impact that you can do by solving that problem? I think that's the way to do it. But I wouldn't necessarily go, okay, well, there's this world problem, I need to then find a business to address this world problem. Because I think if you're doing that, you're sort of dreaming up something rather than fulfilling a need.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, like, you're right. It's like Startup 101 to, like, define and understand and live your, like, problem statements, so that I mean, and also understand that they flex. So, like, problem statements don't just exist all the time consistently. So really taking time to understand that, and speaking to people, and, you know, and how. And I think that's actually probably maybe part of the answer, is like, once you you've got a sort of hypothesis on a problem statement, validate it at every level that you possibly can. And then out of that validation process, it is likely you will find a way to have the most impact on that problem statement. And then it's sort of a continuous question to yourself of every decision you're making. Am I making the most positive impact in this decision, or in this way I'm working, or and a sort of continuous review process of like, can we do things better, or is there a better way to do this to create the most impact possible, but always coming back to that initial like validation piece. Because I mean, people will give you the ideas. If you have a problem and you hypothesize on it, you ask your customers or potential customers, they'll tell you what they want and how it will have the most impact, and they'll quickly tell you if they don't want it as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So with Cauuuse, we did a lot of research sort of around, you know, is there a need for this sort of business? But it actually started earlier than that. It started with, I think on Twitter ages ago, a long time ago, it was like 6 or 7 years ago. I did like a poll where I said, do you know what you're getting, you know, your partner for Christmas? And like most people were like, no. And there's actually this massive problem which Cauuuse exists to solve, sort of primarily, I guess, where, you know, every year we buy tons and tons and tons of gifts for people, and we have no idea whether they're actually going to like them. And most of the time we don't even know what we're going to get them. So we end up just buying rubbish that sort of semi-resembles some thought, or, you know, some thought went into it. And so what usually happens is a lot of these gifts, they either get regifted, they get sent to the charity shop, or they get thrown to landfill. You know, this Christmas we're expected, in spite of the cost of living crisis, to spend about £5 billion on unwanted Christmas gifts, which is nuts. And the stats say about 23 million of those go to landfill. And so Cauuuse exists to solve the problem of, well, hi, Mum, like, what do you want for Christmas? I don't know. So we're producing beautiful gifts that, you know, mean that you do know what to get them, and it's meaningful, and it, you know, it doesn't contribute to that waste problem. So that business was really born out of solving that real fundamental problem that every single one of us goes through.
Amazing. Oh, it's such a shame that you're not going to be ready for Christmas.
Yeah, I know.
No, but it will be like worth it, I think. Also, because like, oh, hello, you've got a dog. It will be worth it though in lots of ways, because I mean, seeing the positive side of it, launching at Christmas might be overwhelming, and giving yourself the time over the year to, you know, test different ideas and build the building blocks with an MVP gives you a little bit more sort of reflection time on what's working and what's not. So I think there's benefits to not necessarily launching at the busiest time of the year. So
I'm choosing to see it that way. I won't lie, I'm a little bit gutted that we won't get there. But honestly, if I was rushing to get, because realistically I'm going to need to get the MVP launched within the next 2 weeks or so, to give people enough time to browse and buy stuff for Christmas, and it just isn't going to happen. And if I do, then I'm not going to present what we're building in the right way. And actually I feel like it's a really critical moment. I feel like our first users, they're probably going to end up being the people that champion what we're doing. And if we're not giving the right impression, we're not giving the right experience, then I think actually that could really go against us. So I'm just going to take a bit more time and just make sure that whilst it's still an MVP, you know, we're doing it properly. We're giving it the best possible chance of finding that sort of product market fit, making sure that the concept is truly proven. And I don't think we can do that if we rush things through.
Yeah, you're right. And I think that comes back to what we were saying about earlier, when you raise investment and stuff, you just go like gung ho with cash into the abyss, and you're like, you sort of lose the like, so many startups will lose that validation piece and that understanding what you're doing as you're doing it, and rushing, and then having to pivot completely, or having to, you know, scrap something and start again. It happened to us. We had to scrap our entire platform and start again.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's and like, with the best will in the world, you just drink your own Kool-Aid, or whatever the phrase is, that you're still on track doing the right things. And if you just keep building, it will, you know, it will happen. But if you keep building in the wrong direction, then it's you know, and you haven't taken the time to listen, then it can catch you out. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I think everyone just needs to like chill out a little bit, and just take a breath. And this is not mainly because I'm actively telling myself to do this at the moment, but just like give yourself the time to reflect on what's going on at the time. And obviously sometimes there's periods where you're really going fast and you're doing that. But if we really want to build something meaningful, then I think we really need to, you know, sit with it for a bit.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, right. So when right, we need to wrap up because I've actually got to go on another call. What's your where can people find your podcast, and when will we be able to listen to it?
So it will be on Spotify and Apple and all the sort of major distribution platforms.
Amazing.
I'd hoped to get it live today, but that hasn't quite worked out. So I'm
Have you recorded it all now?
Yeah, so I've recorded 2 episodes so far, with plans to record another one tomorrow. I'm trying to stack them a little bit.
Can I be on
but
it?
yeah, hopefully I'm gonna. Sorry, did you want to be on it? Is that what you said?
Yeah, can I be on it?
Yeah, of course you can. I'd love to have you on.
Amazing, great! I'd love to be on it. Well, I just want to continue this conversation.
This week. Yeah, no, we need to, obviously.
Yeah. Great. So where Spotify and wherever else you listen to your podcast, is that the sort of vibe?
That's the official line. Yeah, it's going to be on pretty much every channel. I'm using one of those distribution services that does it all for you. So yeah, hopefully this week will be the first episode.
Brill, that sounds wonderful. And it's going to be called How to Build a Purpose Startup
Brand. Yeah.
Brand.
So building a purpose brand. Yeah.
Building a purpose brand. Okay, amazing. I will share it when it's live. And yeah, looking forward to being on it.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Dan. It's been a really great conversation. I feel like we could carry on for ages, but everyone's got to get back to their days. So thank you, and speak soon.
Bye.